Morning. Today is Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, before you call the roll, Channel 35 is usually back there, but today they're out here for technical reasons. Just wanted to let everyone know. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Decker, Bonner, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay, item number 1 are consent agenda items. Are there any commissioner comments on any of the items? Are there any public comments on any of them?
We have no cards, sir.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of the consent agenda items 1A, B, C, D, and E. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. We'll go on to item number 2. Item number 2B is being postponed till next week. Mr. Tefenk, do you want to?
Yes, sir. The department noticed an error in the report, and for noticing purposes, we'll have to renotice the item. It'll be back on next week's agenda with a corrected copy.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's go to item number 2A, the department's report regarding ethics enforcement, quarterly report. Morning, sir. Do we have any commissioner questions on the third quarter report?
I do briefly.
Okay, Commissioner Decker?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Watch your mic closer.
Just some brief questions. I wonder if you can tell me how large your team is that conducts the investigations.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Captain Tim Nordquist, the Commanding Officer of Special Operations Division. I would respectfully request that I be able to answer that question in closed session.
Absolutely. And I understand, and that's fine. The reason I ask is I see for the quarter there were, if I'm reading the report correctly, which really is my question, 27 investigations that were conducted, 20 of which were telephonic. Is that the correct way to read the statistics presented?
Well, we had, yes, a total of 27. We had 8 integrity tests and 19 complaint intake tests. So that would be a total of 27 tests.
Okay. And so my first question really comes to achieving the goals that you state of being able to have the entire department of 10,000 plus 3,000 civilian employees feel the impact of your work and understand that your division is constantly on the job and monitoring things. And when I see 27 total for a quarter, I can't help but think perhaps your team isn't staffed large enough to achieve some of the goals that you've set out. So and we can do that in closed session as appropriate. I can ask the chief for further details, but what struck me from the report was 27 total for a quarter. Understanding investigations are detailed, they take time, they just don't happen overnight. I understand that. But do you want to address any of the issues that I've raised?
Certainly. Commissioner Decker, just to be clear, this only represents one portion of the work that we do at Special Operations Division. So the 27 tests are separate from all the other investigations that we are conducting. So that number is significantly higher throughout the year. In addition, our number of integrity tests during the third quarter was down slightly compared to our norm. And that was because of having to divert some resources for some very significant investigations that we were handling at the same time. However, during the fourth quarter, we made up the difference, and we will finish the year with about the same number of tests as we normally do.
Okay. Well, terrific. I look forward to seeing that report and have a better context for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other commissioner comments on item 2A? Do we have any public comments on item 2A?
We have none, sir.
We have a motion for approval of item 2A. Second, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So 4-0. Let's move to item number 3, the report of. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Commissioners, and Happy New Year's. It's good to be back. I want to make a couple of different remarks today regarding significant instances, and then we'll talk about crime and our personnel numbers as we typically do. First, we just completed, and thank you, Commissioner Solroff and Commissioner Bonner, for your participation with the press conference that we just held relative to the department's first use of the small unmanned aerial system tactic or tool, the part of the pilot program that was implemented in July of 2018 and is in its first year evaluation. Today, the press conference was an effort to announce the first use of this system, as well as to frame the release of a critical incident video that was posted online. It's available by going to LAPD online and looking at those critical incidents. And it details the circumstances in which on January 9th, the department deployed that tool during a barricaded suspect incident involving a robbery suspect who was suspected of being armed and involved in a robbery of a store a month earlier. This was circumstances were unique given the nature of the location and its challenges that it posed to the tactical unit that was attempting to obtain this individual's surrender. The video is self-explanatory, but it is meant to frame how this device is governed, its deployment criteria, and then what we provided in an 11-minute video. We provided the unedited video that was recorded. There is no audio, as the device used in this instance does not have an audio capability. And then we also reference anyone who's interested in further information to the actual documentation that's available online that goes to the governance of this, including the Commission's oversight and in its evaluation of the use of this device in each instance. Moving on, the second matter I want to talk about is that today we enter the second day of the UTLA labor action, the strike involving LA Unified School District. The department continues to work closely with all parties, both management as well as UTLA labor representatives. We have implemented our unified command involving all elements of LA Unified School District Police, LA Sheriff's Department, Department of Transportation, CHP, our fire department, in organizing our efforts to ensure the actions of all involved are lawful, that we facilitate the First Amendment rights of those exercising their collective bargaining efforts with their strike activity. The department activated its Department Operations Center yesterday, and it continues and will continue until further notice. The planning for the event provided a effort. I've had communications with Sheriff Villanueva, as well as with our leadership within the CHP and other departments, and Steve Zipperman from the Chief of LA Unified, and Superintendent Austin Butner and I spoke as recently as last night. And we continue to work in a coordinated fashion to manage this as this unfolds. I'm happy to report that yesterday there was very few instances of any type of problems or challenges. There was, of course, a great deal of rain, which was challenging to all participants. But the demonstration downtown, while I'm confident that it impacted a number of Angelenos as they attempted to move around downtown, was otherwise carried off in a very and responsible way. We did have, of course, across the LA County, we did have 3 instances that I'm aware of. One involving a vandalism involving some tires that were slashed on a campus. It was in the sheriff's area, the sheriff's jurisdiction at the Wisdom Elementary School. And at Sherman Oaks and in San Fernando High School, there were incidents in both those schools of a blocking of an employee attempting to leave or enter the location that resulted in our involvement. There is also a number of other instances in which officers, however, when they're on-scene presence, were able to talk with all parties, were able to peacefully resolve. Moving forward, we will continue to deploy our resources to this. This event involves us detailing officers and detective personnel to each of 369 elementary schools at least twice a day, in the morning during the arrival of students and staff, as well as in the afternoon on their departure. The LA Unified School District and other law enforcement agencies are policing or providing staff for middle schools as well as high schools. And collectively, we all are working from a unified command and understanding what actions are occurring. This morning, we did see an increased level of some conflicts, if you will, between school staff and union members. Again, our officers on scene have been able to de-escalate those situations, and I'm thankful for all parties being responsive to the direction of our officers and ensuring that everyone's rights are respected. I'm thankful also the mayor and the city government has found the means to open up our zoo and our rec centers and libraries for students to afford parents an opportunity to have a safe location for their children to be during the day, should they choose not to attend school. However, I also want to encourage all parents to continue to have their children attend school, and as the department will manage expectations on all sides of this matter. We want, in closing, all parties to remind themselves that they are modeling behavior for young people. Whether they are expressing their collective bargaining and union activities, or their teachers or administrative staff, that our children are watching us, and that I encourage and am encouraged by the responsible behavior that we have seen to this date, and I look forward to that continuing for as long as is necessary during this action. One other matter I want to move on to as a significant event is on the 11th, as we had an officer-involved shooting involving a pit bull. It was on the 11th of January at 12:15 in the afternoon. Hope officers were conducting a check of tents located along the railroad tracks of the 18,500 block of Eddy Street. This is in the Devonshire area, the northwest portion of the San Fernando Valley. And as they approached one of the tents, a 70-pound pit bull exited the tent and charged towards the officers. One of the officers utilized his firearm and struck the dog, and no one else was, fortunately, the officer and no one else was injured during this encounter. Moving over to our crime numbers, the end of January, we're coming very close to a date to be announced that the mayor, myself, and certainly the commissioners are encouraged to participate in a year-end report on where we're at with our crime numbers, our public safety in Los Angeles, as well as the number of our initiatives. In the interim, I'm happy to report that we've ended 2018 with an overall reduction in both violent and property crime. We in those numbers have a 3% reduction in violent crime, which amounted to 23 fewer homicides. Over a 2-year period, we had 35 fewer homicides, 259 homicides this year in 2018 versus 294 in 2016. In regards to shooting victims, which was an area that was a significant concern for us some 3 or 4 years ago, as I point out, we ended the year with 48 fewer shooting victims this year versus last, with 1,008 shooting victims versus 1,170. Versus 1,056 the year before. I want to point out also, though, that over a 2-year period, that number is 169 fewer shooting victims. So our efforts in 2018, as we bring it to a close, I'm very satisfied that our men and women working in partnerships and collaboration with all of our communities were able to see a reduction in violent crime, as well as property crime and overall Part 1 crime reduction of more than 2,600 fewer crime victims. So very pleased with those results. In regards to our traffic safety issues, We did end the year with an overall reduction in fewer fatal collisions this year versus last. However, the challenge that we have there is that our bicyclist-involved collisions actually increased. There was 21 bicyclist-involved fatal collisions in 2018 versus 18 the year before. So our challenge, while we have an overall reduction in fatal collisions involving DUI collisions, hit and runs, motor vehicles versus pedestrians, our cycling, bicyclist safety continues to be a challenge for us. Chief Gramala and as the Director of Office of Special Operations and I spoke yesterday, and her traffic bureau is organizing an effort with the cycling community in the first quarter of 2019 to try to improve cyclist safety, both by their own actions as well as an awareness of the motoring public to their responsibilities in ensuring the rights of cyclists are respected and that their presence on the roadway is safeguarded. As for crime stats for 2019, it's very early in the year. We have overall reductions in all categories, double digits, but I think it's too soon, given the small numbers, to draw any conclusions from those. So I'm going to withhold that till we get a little more time on the books before we start reporting that. As for officer-involved shootings, we did end 2018 with 33 officer-involved shootings. I believe the number is, let me look at my numbers here just to verify that. Yes, 33 officer-involved shootings. 2017, that number was 46. That's a 28% reduction. In the officer-involved shootings involving fatalities, we had 12 officer-involved shootings in 2018, resulting in a fatality. In 2017, that number was 17. Our 4-year average, we closed 2018 with 36% fewer fatal officer-involved shootings than we did for a 4-year average. As a reminder, the department will be producing a 2018 use of force report. I expect that report to be before the commission and ready for your review in mid-March. And that will give us a very much more detailed review of not only officer-involved shootings, but all of our uses of force and the underlying factors involved, as well as a recap of our strategies to de-escalate, to demonstrate our reverence for life and preservation of life as a guiding principle. And with that, I'm going to move over to our personnel numbers. We have 10,080 on payroll. This is approximately 45 individuals higher than our authorized table of organization, meaning that our staffing. However, we do expect in January, this month of January, to see a surge in retirements. There are certain months of the year in which we see a surge in the number of people separating from the organization. So it is our expectation that that number will be back within our budgeted amount within the next 30 days. Our civilian on payroll, we have 3,015. We have 387 reserve officers, and we have a total of 1,428 cadets. And that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Or comments.
Chief? Commissioner Bonner?
I'm just going to go back to the top first couple of questions about the strike.
Yes.
Could you comment, you mentioned briefly between the LAPD, the CHP, the sheriff, some of how you were deployed, but can you comment briefly really on what the lines of jurisdiction are, what everybody's mission really is, and also with regard to the costs associated with that, is every department just absorbing their own costs, but just speak a little bit about that part of it.
So thank you for that opportunity. So the mission is in referencing a unified command is that each of the agencies around that table of responsibility, that command table, share in the same mission, which is to safeguard the lives of all individuals, both those students, primarily and first and foremost the students, but also the staff and professional staff of the school district, as well as those members of UTLA that are striking and that are expressing their disagreement and using that tactic in the collective bargaining effort. So the mission is uniform. And so as we go about our objectives, our strategies, our tactics, each person around that table falls back to the responsibility of how does their mission, or how do their strategies and tactics and actions support that mission. Secondly, the roles of responsibilities are clear, so that people understand what their responsibilities are. For instance, LA Unified School District is the primary, the police department is the primary law enforcement agency responsible for the middle schools and high schools in Los Angeles. They've taken on that task. They have gone to canceling all days off. They are on 12-hour watches, and they have mobilized, if you will, their department to take on that very sizable responsibility. We have not mobilized, but we have reorganized the department to take on the responsibility of having staffing at each of the elementary schools in LA City at start and end of school day. That has required the department to, if you will, reassign investigative personnel from a host of commands across the city to be detailed into the street so that they can have that physical presence there, while at the same time allowing us to also muster or gather resources for demonstrations and marches. Today there'll be a demonstration in the Civic Center that will largely encompass the mid portion of the day, in which we'll have added police personnel there to safeguard all participants. And then lastly, we've reorganized the department to do this while also providing our standard deployment in uniform patrols for the typical radio calls and crime prevention and crime and our problem-solving efforts out in the areas. So this is an extraordinary pull. I want to congratulate and thank on its early stage Chief Arcos, Chief Gramala, Chief Green, Chief McCarthy, Mr. Alicon, for their efforts in command and control and organizing and effectively realigning this organization with its existing resources. We will continue to use, we have responsibilities. Last night there was a shooting in Venice area. We continue to have violence in other parts of the city in which we must still have police resources. So I'm proud of their work to realign that with our existing resources. As to underlying costs, we will capture the use of, if we must resort to the use of overtime because of strike-related activities, and we'll identify that. However, at this point, these are all obligations that are part of being the police department for Los Angeles City and for dealing with the realities of a large city such as ourselves, and activities such as strikes and labor actions and so forth are part and parcel of such an existence. So at this point, I don't have any cost estimates for you. We will be, at this point, hopeful that we can minimize any extraordinary costs, but I will say that to the public, to people who have investigations that they're a victim of or they're involved in, they will see an impact on our ability to investigate those crimes and do follow-up investigations. We will continue to prioritize and have sufficient resources in place for crimes of violence, homicides, shootings, and so forth. But other crimes, burglary investigations, theft investigations, those more complex investigations that take specialized detectives on a day-in, day-out routine, those resources have been realigned to strike activities. And so I don't want to, I don't want to cry a peril. It's just, but there is an impact, and I want to be realistic with the members of our public and ask for their patience as we move through these days, and we'll restore those staffing levels as soon as possible.
Can you just split that hair briefly on the staffing? Are you able to say, just broad brush, how much of the additional workload, and I'm just using that term generally associated with the strike, how much of that is being met with reassigning and reallocating, resources, so that someone who would otherwise be working a shift is maybe doing something different than they're doing, so there's no net increase in overtime costs, perhaps.
Right.
How much of it is that level of activity as opposed to overtime? Broadly speaking.
Broad scale measure, 50%. 50% of my daytime staffing is now detailed to this event. We are talking in the hundreds of officers. The math alone, 369 elementary schools, staffing that alone with a minimum of 2 or more personnel. In addition to, for instance, this morning, we had at RFK, there was some increased levels of conflict. There were 7 entrances to that location in which some staff members and UTLA strikers had some conflicts in which we augmented the existing resources of LA Unified School District Police, which meant that we took resources that would otherwise be in patrol or working some other assignment and detailed them to provide for the peace and ensure that rights were respected and that everyone was able to operate in a safe manner.
And lastly, what is, with regard to the sheriff and the CHP, are they, you mentioned the USD, they're taking over the middle and high schools, you're covering the elementary schools, and are they doing just the same in unincorporated areas?
Yes.
and traffic control, or what's the?
So LA Unified, I'm sorry, my apologies, I did not complete that thought process. LA Sheriff's Department is addressing all the elementary schools in the county in the unincorporated area. We've also reached out. There's 42 other municipalities in Los Angeles that have their own police departments, and the Unified Command has reached out to those other departments and asked for their participation and support to provide a presence at these schools as well to assist the Sheriff's Department and their staffing. And then lastly, the CHP, their role is our concern for the safety of students and others relative to freeway incursions. So we have contingencies in place to monitor our freeways and to safeguard the motoring public as well as others who may view that as an opportunity to express their viewpoint. The freeways, and I'll close by saying all of these staffings is geared towards the bent of allowing for and facilitating the safe expression of everyone's individual views, both management, staff that is staffing these school operations, allowing these school operations to maintain some semblance of operation, as well as the members of UTLA that are expressing their collective bargaining rights through this strike, as well as others that would join them. And in facilitating all that, we are operating as much as possible as a step back. We are not the story. We're here to safeguard. However, let me be clear that we also have a number of contingencies in this staffing model to ensure that any expression of violence, property damage, unlawful conduct as such will have a swift and immediate response. And so this layer of this onions has many layers, some of which I've not talked about.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that thorough report. As always, I wanted to kind of piggyback on the question about, I was obviously quite struck to hear you say that as a result of the deployment at the 359 elementary schools.
69.
369, you said 59. That is going to have an impact in terms of response to victims of certain crimes in certain situations, and obviously none of us wants that. So would you mind just giving just a little bit more detail as to what, in your mind, justifies such a significant deployment of resources to the elementary schools, or to the elementary schools where there's, as opposed to the, where the bigger strike actions are happening, or other places where you'd normally deploy?
Well, the preservation of life is our driving factor, and so our value right now is to safeguard the lives of children, their safety, their sense of security, as well as the staff, as well as those UTLA members that are striking. Is that as this is a tumultuous time, every labor action involves emotions and actions and ideas about how that should be expressed, and we're there to ensure a presence of where people can operate within a safe operating environment, and that they can do their expression within bounds, and that there's a presence that is preemptive so that things don't escalate. For instance, last night Chief Arcos and I spoke about the instances at San Fernando High School, We have other rumor control, as you might imagine. You have reports about this and that. Mr. Superintendent Buettner and I spoke relative to tires being slashed. So we are bringing all that information to the Unified Command to understand where are those hot spots, where are those instances where that expression occurs, and ensure that we have a more visible presence and a forceful presence in the sense of enforcement when such conduct occurs. And at the same time, we throttle back and we take a more facilitative role in, for instance, yesterday, the tens of thousands of people who did demonstrations downtown, and just facilitate those for their safe passage as they moved about, as well as the public. So I think all of this matters a great deal, because in a free society and in an environment of labor management role, historically, in the last 100 years, law enforcement, 150 years, has oftentimes been viewed as an element of management, as an arm of management, or as an enforcer of a draconian style of capitalism or something. And so it's important that we invest in this in the sense of facilitating and in peaceful and seeking everyone's peaceful engagement while they go about their collective efforts for their collective interests. And that's a good use of police resources in my mind, because it builds public's trust that we are where we need to be. If a person's home was burglarized, or a person lost a piece of equipment or property, those impacts are going to, this shifting causes some impact on those investigations. But I'd much rather have a child who's 12, when they're 22, look back and reflect that the strike that occurred in 2019 was one that was managed without loss of life, without injury, without riotous situations, and that the police played a supportive and an effective role in helping all parties navigate this course.
Do we have any public comments, cards turned in on item number 3, the report?
We have 4, sir.
Okay,
We have Jamie Garcia, Hamid Khan, Audrey George, and Gina Viola.
okay. Yes, these are on the chief's report. Morning.
So, good morning. It's a lot for us to talk about in 2 minutes, which is, typical of this space. We're not given much time to really address things, and not a lot of trust. I mean, we come here with facts, we come here with anger, oftentimes because of the competency that we have up here in dealing with what is really going on. I really wanted to address the drone thing, but as you spoke more and more about the teacher strike, I feel like that needs to be responded to as well. But, just for a reminder, just to put it on the record, how the community came out against these drones, came out very strongly against the drones, kept the drones grounded. But that doesn't seem to be of any concern to the commission, because the commission operates as an independent body, choosing what it wants to do, deciding what it thinks the community wants, despite what the community is coming out and saying. So it's just really important that we constantly reiterate that you all are on the side of the police, choose what you want, decide that you trust the police, and don't really give any concern to what we think. You basically say, well, we're going to safeguard it, we're going to put in all these restrictions, and therefore we're going to expand policing. And what I find interesting in just saying that is I also wanted to bring up something that you didn't talk about, but I was thinking about all this expansion, about, all this deployment to all these protests, thinking about the expanding of the drone program, but you won't expand anything to open up the documents of officer-involved shooting. You won't take that time to actually deploy your staff to allow us to unearth what has actually happened in this police department. It's just like destroying them, like Long Beach, like Inglewood. You might as well say you want to destroy them because you want to hide who you really are, what has really happened, but you have time and you have services to deploy to the strike. You have enough money to expand the drone program. You constantly have money to expand your enforcement efforts, but you have no time or concern to address our concerns to make things more public for us. So that's something we need to think about. That's your
Thank you.
concern to make that available to us.
Next speaker, please.
Hamid Khan.
Morning, Mr. Khan.
I'm trying to figure out the spin that Michael Moore is putting on, and I was going to speak about the drones too, but I will get to it. But I think looking at the history of the police and going back to the Red Squads, And I remember when we started talking about the suspicious activity reporting program, how Michael Downing was just jumping up and down saying that, well, the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition is claiming that there are red squads in LAPD. Well, the answer is that there are. I mean, so let's not fool ourselves. It's a spin. And people who don't know about the red squads, these were these covert sections, intelligence gathering and spy sections, going back to the Chicago Police Department in the 1800s, which led to the creation of Mayday. So the Haymarket strike in 1886, and by 1888, Chicago had created red squads, and LAPD has its own history. So I think that continues. So you are there to protect property. So you are there. Let's get this record straight, and don't give us this bullshit about this balanced policing, because that's the role of the police that remains, to protect property. But I think want to go back to the drones, and I had a chance to listen to and watch the press conference this morning. And the core of this press conference is that the spin is on, the propaganda is on. Exactly what we spoke about mission creep last year when this fight was going on, or in 2017, that the mission creep has started, where the chief himself now, and in the press conference, speaks about, and then brought on Horace Frank, who completely lied in front of everybody else when we were having this whole issue, about making decisions as we go along, because the determination of a barricaded suspect was really determined right on the spot and as these decisions were made. And then he goes on to say that there are always multiple contingencies that we're going to be looking at. So the spin, the reevaluation of the pilot program, which is going to happen probably in June or so. So now watch this as the spin starts. Watch this as the propaganda goes on. Of course, the media is not going to ask these bigger questions.
Next speaker, please.
Audrey George, please.
George. Morning.
And this is how the role of this is going to change. So we continue to say no to this bullshit.
Morning.
It was outrageous, I think, Chief Moore, for you to make a plea, express your preference for people sending their children to school during this strike. That is such an obvious demonstration on your part of a lack of support for strikers. I don't believe it's, as a spokesperson for the LAPD, that that's appropriate. I believe that by over-policing schools right now, you are predictively you're criminalizing the strikers and telling people to expect violence. I believe that if you were striking, if the LAPD was striking, that and someone made comments like that, encouraging people to cross picket lines, encouraging strike breaking, you would be outraged, as I am right now. And regarding the drones, I'm going to be looking at that press conference, which I missed. I'm very interested to see how many of the 15 to 20 protocols that are supposed to come into play before the use of those drones, how many of those actually were followed on this thing that happens on a contingency, case-by-case, emergency basis. I never believed that those protocols were realistic and that you intended to follow them in the first place. And I do think that press conference should have been more widely, the word of it should have gone out so that people, more of us could have attended and heard it right from the horse's mouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina Viola.
Good morning. Is this the last speaker on the?
Yes, sir.
Chiefs? Okay. Good morning.
Yes, lucky you, last speaker. I am a public school mom. Anybody else on this board send their children to public school? I have 2 in public school right now, in 7th grade. You've encouraged me to send my children to school to sit in an auditorium with 300 kids and 1 educator. Do you have any idea what this strike is about? It's about reducing classroom size. I think it is outrageous that the district would ask us to send our children to school, to sit in a gymnasium, to sit in an auditorium. Additionally, I would like to know why you're redeploying these resources. I have been striking at East Valley High. That is where my children's school is located. We have donuts, we have coffee, we have signs, we have chants. We're walking back and forth. It's very peaceful. Parents are supporting the teachers. They're driving them to the metro station so that they can then come down and assemble here. And you're deploying officers for what? These are teachers. They have the hardest job in the entire world. And now you're criminalizing them. You are showing students that they're worth being policed because their teachers are out in the rain, in the cold, fighting for them. That's the only voice my students have, Shane Goldsmith's students have, as the teachers. There's nobody else speaking for them. Buettner, who you mentioned, yesterday said there were 3,500 people downtown. That was the number he put out. He doesn't know numbers. I thought that was the whole reason we hired him. And yet you're going to him for advice about what to do for policing. There were tens of thousands of people down here last night, so yesterday, during the day. So I don't understand why you would be taking what he says worth anything for what to do about this strike. But you need to pull the police out of the schools. Why are you sending them there when there are no students? 150,000 students went to school yesterday out of the 600,000. So what's the need for the extra police?
Thank you. Let's go to public comment now.
Public comment. We have 5 comment cards. We have Gina DiPietro, Jacqueline Richardson, and Gina Viola.
Good morning.
Good morning, LAPD commissioners, and good morning to LAPD. It breaks my heart when I hear that people think they're being criminalized for having a police presence. I think it's important to keep safety, so thank you to the peacemakers and the safety keepers who are keeping peace amongst the parties in the school district strike. I thank you deeply for your presence, and God bless everyone involved. I hope this resolves quickly. I had a quick question for Chief Michael Moore. I missed it. I was gone for item 2B about the forfeited assets.
It's held to next week.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, so we didn't deal with it.
Okay. Can I just ask, maybe because they can include this for next week, what the survey that you're getting $250,000 is going to be about? I'm just really curious because it's on, it just says a community survey, but it doesn't say what the survey is about. But, okay.
What I'm going to do is, we're not supposed to, we're limited as to our ability to respond to your questions and concerns, but I would reference you to Chief Bob Green in the back. He can give you all the details.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Much.
God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Jacqueline Richardson.
Good morning.
Good morning. There's a wall going up to the east of us for the illegal Mexican people to keep out illegal immigrants. We also need a wall to the west of us to keep out illegal Russian white people. They don't all have papers either, and some of them are also illegal. The only thing is we don't know how many. Some of the Russians may have some of the criteria. Some of the Russians may have criminal records. To keep the white illegal Russian people out of here, not only do they need a wall, but they need to keep out people who have criminal records anywhere, here or over there, be at least 21 years of age, not have 3 wives. Some of the Russian people have 3 wives. And also, the criteria should be, they should not be making babies either here or there. They believe in making illegal babies and not supporting them. They should be gainfully employed in the U.S. for at least the last 2 years, and they should also be self-supporting at least for the last 2 years. And last but not least, good character. Otherwise, if they don't have standards, we need a wall as high as the one we're building for the Mexican people to the east, as high as that for the west, for the white Russian people, to be fair to everyone. If they need walls, they need walls.
Thank you.
Gina Viola, followed by John Avalos Rios and Jamie Garcia.
And is that the extent?
Yes, sir. We have one card with no name on it, sir.
Okay.
Hi again. So I want to touch on 1421. Yes. And I want to touch on how it's outrageous that you wouldn't have in this day and age the ability to produce those records. That is clear that you have something to hide. Clear. So in this day and age, in the stroke of a few buttons or somebody going down to a records room, that stuff should be able to be supplied. You can use cadets, you can use interns, you can use civilian staff, whatever you need to do. That message you're sending to me is that there are things to be hidden, and that's what you're using that for. I also want to circle back to the union issue. The police officers have a union. They have a very strong union. And my feeling is you're going to utilize that union to prevent 1421 from actually being able to do any good. So what's going to happen when you do that after you've criminalized UTLA as a union for striking, for smaller class size, for support staff? You're bringing extra police in, and it makes me wonder, is it because you're expecting teachers to act as police? And now that they're not there, that's why you're filling that gap? So many issues in this city with that type of stuff. But the 1421, you have to comply with that. If you don't have anything to hide, then comply with that. I will give you a host of volunteers to help you with that. I own a temporary employment agency, so I have access to lots and lots of staff. So if you need some volunteers to come down to produce those records, I am happy to help you with that. I'm going on record now. I will support the police and help you staff that so that you can produce those records for us.
Information to Deputy Chief Green. We'll take that information.
Happily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Avalos Rios, Jamie Garcia. And then we do have one card that says Dr. Martin Luther King, so that person will be the last speaker.
Morning, sir.
First of all, regarding the union strike, Melina Abdullah has all over Twitter that the president of this board is all saying great things about Buettner. That's the other rich guy that's buying all these charter schools and putting all this money to destroy public education. That's terrible, president of this board. That you're a union buster, in other words, aren't you? Like a union, but this is a union busting commission. I can't believe it. It's all over Twitter. Thousands of people are reading this. Can't believe it. And your son is on the MSNBC. Great job he has. Such privilege. Why are rich people running everything around here? So you are in charge of a commission that throws people out of this room. You threw Waukesha Wilson's aunt out of here. You dragged her out of here. Why do the rich people have all this power? And then you refuse to have your meetings in the community, and we have to have them here where we're watched very closely by these FBI guys. They just watch every movement we make as we're sitting there. And then I have to listen to this lady begging for more prisons. It's traumatizing to go home after she comes up here, build another prison. We should be talking about closing down the prisons in the San Joaquin Valley. I can't believe how many prisons you've built there. Since I left for college, so many prisons. Chowchilla, Madera, Hanford. We should be talking about closing the prison. And where's our Chicana commissioner? She's always...
Thank you, sir.
Jamie Garcia.
Yeah, so, I think everything people are expressing here right now in regards to the strike is really looking at how children should be prioritized. Because when we do prioritize the welfare of the youth, we need less of law enforcement, we need less of violence to beat us into submission. But I wanted to circle back on why there needs to be so much police, because we know that even when you ask for permission to be on the streets, you are surveilled. So we go back to my colleague Hamid brought up Red Squads, brought up May Day. And so it made me think about, the last previous May Days, and all the surveillance equipment that you deploy during May Day. And whether or not it belongs to the county sheriffs or if it belongs to you, we all know that you're working in partnership, and we know about the information sharing environment. So we know that all this information is accessible. So we had freedom on the move, whether it was permitted or whether it wasn't. And I'm sure that the commissioners know what freedom on the move is. So we have cameras. We have LARCOP. And are you guys aware of what LARCOP is and the way that it takes pictures? What was interesting is that even your line officers couldn't tell me what LARCOP was as we were interviewing them. They said, oh, they're satellite dishes. Had no clue what they were. And then you have, your intelligence gathering guidelines, where I'm sure you have plenty of officers deployed in these different meetings that teachers unions are having, because as you all are well aware, it only takes one tip to actually put an officer into any kind of community group to gather information. So when it comes to surveillance and who you're surveilling, it is not surprising that you are deployed. It is not surprising that you are monitoring, because you do see people as a threat to your power, a threat to access of your resources, because what you want is more. What you want is the ability to control people with the use of force, with violence, even though you want to tout that there is a community policing effort there. We know it's through violence that you do it.
Next speaker. Morning,
good,
sir.
It's good to see the pieces of shit are in session. But as Dr. King did, he stood up and talked to pieces of shit on the regular. And I think in the spirit of Dr. King, he stood on the walls of the United States of America. Do y'all remember what he called the United States of America before white people like yourself got him killed and murdered him? He called America the greatest purveyor of violence. You know why he called America the greatest purveyor of violence? This country, y'all, how old is the United States? Give me a ballpark figure. Just throw a number out there. How many of those years have we been at war? How many people of color have we killed in those wars? Since the quote-unquote founding of this country, how many indigenous folks did America kill? That's why King stood up and looked at Soberoff's white ass and called you motherfuckers out. And I'm calling your ass out too, Moore. Because you called Sacramento and told Sacramento 1421 shouldn't be retroactive. 1421 shouldn't look at police records past or before today. Moore is committed to protecting that America be that greatest purveyor of violence. And today I stand on this wall in the spirit of Dr. King to say, fuck you, Michael Moore. Fuck you, Steve Soberoff. And I hope King visits your white ass tonight. I hope that I Have a Dream speech doesn't come as some wonderful falafel or wonderful pancake to your dream tonight. I hope that hunts the shit out of you.
Other speakers for public comment?
We have no other speakers, sir. We are now on item number 5, closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A, 1, and 2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
No comments on either?
No comments,
Okay,
sir.
good. Thank you.
Sure. Good, yourself. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 5A2 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
Hi, I'm Shannon Lamert Park. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.